Okay, so we're just going to take a moment before we got started. We couldn't start this webinar without acknowledging the tragic and recent discovery of 215 children of the Kamloops Indian Residential School. We need to do better to serve our mission. As we reviewed our strategic plan last fall, we knew our shortfalls in terms of our outreach and even on our own board. In 2020, we started to take the steps to be more reflective and inclusive of the communities we serve and with whom we have yet to connect. Recent events call upon us to do more than talk or post statements. This means reaching out to new communities and channels. It means supporting new research into examining non-traditional celiac communities, including Indigenous populations, and addressing the barriers to diagnosis and treatment. This means advocating for the elimination of systemic barriers in our healthcare system. It means having more peer supporters with greater diversity and helping them to self-advocate. It means taking this message beyond Canada and to our international meetings. This is going to take time, and we have a lot to learn as an organization, but we are determined to do it. We hope you join us in our journey as we transform. We stand as the CCA in solidarity against any forms of racism and discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. All right, good evening or afternoon, depending on where you are, to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Tonight's presentation is titled Nutrition 101 Celiac Edition. My name is Megan Thompson, and I am the Donor Relations and Administrative Coordinator at the Canadian Celiac Association. And joining me tonight as well is our Health Promotion Manager, Nicole Byram, and our presenters, Brooklyn Brubacher and Shelby Kennedy. Before we get started, we're just going to go over some background information on the CCA. It is our vision that every Canadian with celiac disease is diagnosed and empowered. As many of you already know, the Canadian Celiac Association is a registered charity and for nearly 50 years has been advocating for safe food, empowering individuals with evidence-based education and information, and investing in research to help improve the quality of life of people with celiac disease. We have a client and peer support service, which is offered for free thanks to our generous donors. You can speak with our registered dietitian, peer support, or trained CCA staff for information and advice on celiac disease and gluten disorders. This is offered from Tuesday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You can email askthecca@celiac.ca, even outside those hours, and someone will get back to you. And you can also call 905-507-6208, extension 224, to speak with our client and peer support. Our gluten-free certification program helps give our community peace of mind when shopping for certified gluten-free products. We have a great gluten-free product finder on our website where you can type in any sort of brand and find out what products they have that are gluten-free. We also have a Facebook group with about 1,600 members on it right now. And here we share recipes, tips, and tricks for being gluten-free, and we also host some contests and giveaways there. The group is moderated by the CCA and backed by our Professional Advisory Council. It is a great resource to connect with other members of the community. And if you would receive our emails already, you'd be familiar with these publications. The Canadian Celiac magazine comes out 3 times a year. The latest issue came out in April. And our Better Living Gluten-Free newsletter also comes out every other month. You can sign up for our emails through the website. The CCA relies on the generosity of our donors. We hope that you will consider helping to empower families with celiac disease by donating. You can do that through our website, or you can contact me directly with any questions. I can leave my email in the chat if anyone wants to talk. And just a few upcoming events we have. Gluten-free 101 is our monthly webinar to help you navigate the gluten-free diet. The next session we have scheduled is on Thursday, June 17th from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. You can register for that on our website, celiac.ca/events. And later on this year, we will be hosting our national conference virtually on November 13th and 14th. On November 13th, the programming is for people on the cusp of diagnosis and those that are newly diagnosed. And the programming on November 14th is for people who have mastered the diet, as well as healthcare practitioners looking for more advanced information about celiac disease and gluten disorders. More information about the conference will come out later on. And if you're interested in learning about that, you can sign up to our emails and we'll keep you updated. And before we begin the presentation, I'd just like to review how the webinar works. So everyone is muted. And if you have a question for our presenters tonight, you can type them into the Q&A box. We will get to them at the end of the presentation. And the webinar is being recorded, so you can access it later on our YouTube channel, and we will also email everybody the link to that once it's available. And now our speakers for tonight. Brooklyn and Shelby are both completing their Masters of Applied Nutrition at the University of Guelph. Previously to interning with the CCA, they were both working clinically. Brooklyn was at the Cambridge Memorial Hospital and Shelby was at Grand River Hospital. They are excited to be working with the CCA, learning more about population nutrition. Today, Brooklyn is coming to us from Waterloo, Ontario, and Shelby is from Calgary, Alberta. So I'm going to turn it over to them to get the presentation started.
Thank you, Megan. I'm hoping you can all see and hear me okay. Just going to share my screen for the slideshow. All right, perfect. So to begin, I just wanted to give a brief overview of what you can expect in our presentation today. We have a just under 30-minute slideshow prepared, which covers general nutritional status, nutritional content of gluten-free food, and then some specific nutrients of concern for this population. We have a few polls scattered throughout, and then we will conclude with a question and answer session with the support of CCA's registered dietitian, Nicole Byron. So let's test out the poll function with this first question. How familiar are you with celiac disease? You should see a poll pop up on your screen. You can just rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, perfect. So it looks like we've got a little bit of everything here. So I will just move into the next slide then. For those who are less familiar, celiac disease is not a food allergy. It is an autoimmune disease in which the system reacts against gluten. When one with celiac disease consumes gluten, the villi of the small intestine are damaged. In this photo, you can see what a healthy intestine looks like compared to someone with untreated celiac disease. There are many complications associated with damaged villi, such as impaired absorption and many unpleasant side effects. The nutritional status of those with celiac disease is highly variable. It's dependent on the length of time the disease was active prior to diagnosis and the degree of inflammation and damage to the small intestine. The more damaged villi will be at a higher risk of impaired absorption, and therefore their nutritional status may be at more risk. Additionally, as with any member of the general population, nutritional status is highly dependent on the individual's diet. As I've mentioned, a key nutritional concern for those with celiac disease is malabsorption. When the villi are damaged, the surface area is decreased and there are less access points for nutrients to be absorbed into our bodies. Some specific nutritional concerns for those with celiac disease include the nutrient content of gluten-free substitute foods. Sometimes nutrient-poor gluten-free products are chosen as a substitute for more nutrient-dense wheat-based products. For example, some gluten-free cereals may contain less fiber and vitamins and more sugar than their gluten-containing alternative. Secondly, some people with celiac disease may be lactose intolerant upon diagnosis. This may sometimes be temporary until the gut heals or may have longer lasting effects, causing the elimination of dairy from the diet and perhaps resulting in lower intakes of calcium and vitamin D. Lastly, it can be challenging to find gluten-free whole grain products, and therefore the intake of whole grains is limited. Whole grain foods are full of nutrients such as protein, fiber, B vitamins, and minerals, and the intake of these are associated with many health benefits. So, what are some examples of gluten-free grains you can safely add to your diet? I've included a few here, such as quinoa, brown rice, buckwheat, amaranth, millet, and sorghum. All of these choices are both whole grain and gluten-free. Earlier, I mentioned that one's nutritional status is highly influenced by their diet. Recently, Canada released an updated food guide. It looks like a plate. You can use this to visually strive toward a balanced diet. It's recommended that fruits and vegetables typically should fill about half of your plate. Fruits and vegetables have many important nutrients such as fiber, vitamins A, C, and E, as well as magnesium, zinc, phosphorus, and folic acid. This category is relatively low risk for those with celiac and easy to add to your diet. 1/4 of your plate should be protein foods. Protein foods are a moderate risk as some contain gluten, such as some breaded meats. However, there are many gluten-free alternatives. You need protein in your diet to help your body repair cells and make new ones. Protein is also important for growth and development. The last 1/4 of your plate should be filled with whole grain foods. This is a high-risk category for those with celiac disease, and it's important to make sure that all grains are gluten-free. However, as shown on the previous slide, there are lots of gluten-free whole grain options to choose from. Whole grain foods have more fiber than refined grains, and eating foods higher in fiber can help lower your risk of stroke, colon cancer, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes.
As Brooklyn previously mentioned, a large amount of gluten-free products on the market do tend to be lower in fiber, protein, iron, folate, and other B vitamins. This is because most gluten-free versions are made with refined flours and starches that have not been enriched or fortified with vitamins and minerals. But by focusing on selecting products that are based from more nutritious whole grains, such as brown rice, millet, oats, quinoa, sorghum, or teff, or using products that are fortified or enriched can help those who are gluten-free achieve a nutritionally balanced diet. Vitamins and minerals are lost in food processing, but can be added back into those products afterwards. When nutrients are added back in, it is referred to as enrichment, where fortification would be the addition of nutrients into a food where they were not originally present. Typically, gluten-free products are not enriched, but some select brands offer enriched or fortified products, so do your research. Shelley Case's book, Gluten-Free Diet, A Comprehensive Resource Guide, is a great resource and features a list of brands that offer fortified or enriched products that are gluten-free. An example of fortification would be the addition of vitamin D to milk or calcium to orange juice. And an example of enrichment would be the milling of grain. When the bran and the wheat germ are removed, the grain contains less fiber, less B vitamins, less iron, and less of other nutrients.
Earlier, I mentioned lactose intolerance as a common complication in those with celiac disease. Lactose intolerance is a result of our bodies not having enough lactase, which are the enzymes needed to digest lactose. These sensitivity levels can vary between individuals, and while some may not experience any aversion to dairy, some may have many negative side effects upon consumption. If you find that some dairy bothers you and some doesn't, try eating yogurt and hard cheeses or lactose-free beverages instead of having dairy milk, ice cream, and soft cheeses. There are 2 key nutrients in dairy products that are essential for bone health, the reason why this area is a concern. I will briefly touch on them here, but if this is something you would like more information on, the CCA just ran a webinar all about bone health with Osteoporosis Canada, and you can find the recording on their YouTube channel. Calcium is the most abundant mineral in the body. It's found in bones, teeth, blood, muscles, and the fluid between cells. It's important for bone health, muscle contraction and relaxation, heartbeat regulation, blood clotting, nerve transmission, and the release of hormones and enzymes. Although it is often found in dairy products such as cheese, yogurt, and milk, you can also find calcium in dairy-free alternatives such as tofu, fortified orange juice, and salmon. It's also interesting to note that dairy-free milk, yogurt, or cheese choices, such as almond or soy, often have very similar amounts of calcium as their dairy-containing alternative. And this is due to fortification and enrichment processes that Shelby was talking about. So comparing a fortified orange juice to a 2% milk, which do you think has the most calcium? I'll give you a second to answer in the poll. All right, so we had a pretty even split. The correct answer would actually be milk, however, only by 1 milligram. So when you consume equal amounts of these beverages, you are virtually receiving the exact same amount of calcium. This shows that even if you follow a dairy-free diet, with a little planning and nutrition label reading, you can still meet your calcium requirements through whole foods. Another key nutrient of concern in celiac disease or in following a dairy-free diet is vitamin D. Vitamin D works alongside calcium to ensure bone health. In children, this is essential for growing strong bones. And in adults, this is essential for maintaining strong bones. Vitamin D is unique as most of our vitamin D is absorbed by the sun. Our skin is able to absorb and utilize sunlight exposure and convert this into vitamin D. However, from May to October here in Canada, the angle of the sun compared to the earth causes all sunlight to be non-accessible for vitamin D absorption. Additionally, during the summer months when sunlight is more accessible, we're encouraged to wear sunscreen and spend time in the shade to decrease our skin cancer risk. You can find vitamin D in some food products, such as cod liver oil, fortified orange juice, milk, and salmon. But vitamin D supplementation is recommended to all Canadians. And with the extra concerns for absorption in those with celiac disease, this recommendation for supplementation may be extra important. Deficiencies in calcium and vitamin D are not uncommon in individuals with celiac disease. This can lead to bone diseases and could affect all ages. However, there are many effective treatment options for bone disease. Typically, if caught early enough, treatment can restore bones back to a healthy state. Firstly, for those with celiac disease, it is essential to follow a strict and total gluten-free diet. This ensures that your small intestine is healthy and the villi are able to maximize absorption. Secondly, it's recommended to eat a variety of whole foods. Adding foods high in calcium and vitamin D, such as dairy products, fatty fish, fortified juices, and cereals to one's diet will help to grow and maintain strong bones. A general recommendation to decrease bone disease risk is also to limit caffeine, alcohol, and smoking. Not food related, you're encouraged to stay active. Try to move your body daily to help keep your bones strong. Exercising regularly reduces the rate of bone loss, conserves bone tissue, and lowers the risk of fractures. In children, weight-bearing activities as simple as walking puts good pressure on the bones to strengthen them. We also encourage you to ensure you are meeting your protein needs as it gives the bones strength and flexibility. Additionally, protein is a big component of muscles, which are crucial to mobility and fall prevention. Lastly, if you feel you may be at a risk for deficiency, consider talking to your healthcare professional about supplementation.
A major nutrient of concern in celiac disease is iron. This mineral is needed to produce hemoglobin and myoglobin. Hemoglobin is a component of red blood cells that carries oxygen throughout the body, and the myoglobin protein helps store oxygen in our muscle cells. Iron is important in many metabolic functions and contributes to healthy hair, skin, and nails. It can be found in both animal or plant-based protein sources, gluten-free grains such as rice or quinoa, and leafy greens. There are two types of iron, heme and non-heme iron. Heme iron is more readily absorbed by the body, and its absorption is not affected by other foods in your diet. And it is generally found in only animal-based protein sources, such as red meat sources, such as pork or beef, poultry, fish, and shellfish. And non-heme iron is not as well absorbed as heme iron. Its absorption is actually affected by other foods in the diet, which I'll touch on later. And it is found in fruit, vegetables, grain, and eggs, and is also found in smaller amounts in animal-based protein sources. Sources of non-heme iron would be fruits, vegetables, legumes. Ones that are high in non-heme iron would be prunes, prune juice, spinach, peas. It's also found in grains such as amaranth, teff, rice, quinoa, and oats, and is also found in nuts and seeds. Iron deficiency is actually the #1 symptom seen upon celiac diagnosis in adults. Low iron stores in the body is iron deficiency. This can occur due to an inadequate intake of dietary iron intake in our bodies, impaired iron absorption, or blood loss. This will affect the production of hemoglobin and the red blood cells that would normally deliver oxygen throughout the body, and thus resulting in iron deficiency anemia. In order to combat this, you want to ensure you are following a strict gluten-free diet to allow for intestinal healing. You want to maximize your iron absorption by choosing to consume foods that are high in iron. You might also want to consider eating heme iron and non-heme iron sources at the same time. And you also might want to consider combining vitamin C foods with non-heme iron foods, such as if you were to have something like a spinach salad, which would be a good source of non-heme iron. You could combine it with something like bell peppers or strawberries on top, which would be high in vitamin C, and that would help you actually absorb more of the non-heme iron. You may also want to avoid drinking coffee or tea with meals, which I know might be difficult. It's just that the tannins in the coffee and tea actually reduce your absorption of iron in your body. So if you would stick to maybe having it prior to your meal or after your meal, that would be a lot better. Symptoms of iron deficiency anemia can include extreme fatigue, weakness and irritability, shortness of breath, pale skin, headache, dizziness, brittle nails, sore tongue, decreased appetite, and increased susceptibility to infections. How we can combat this would be to follow a strict gluten-free diet to allow for your intestines to heal, eating a wide variety of foods and consuming more iron-rich foods, and then maybe speaking with your healthcare professionals to consider supplementation if needed. Another nutrient of concern in celiac disease is folate. This B vitamin is needed in the formation of DNA, RNA, and red. It is required for protein metabolism and enzyme reactions, and it also has an important role in the development of new cells. And it's also important to note that it is a very crucial vitamin for pregnant women as it helps reduce neural tube defects. Folate deficiency. So that means you are low in dietary folate. This might not just be due to your dietary intake, it might also be due to your decreased absorption of folate, maybe due to either undiagnosed celiac or maybe your diet not being as gluten-free as you thought it might be. Some medications can actually deplete your levels or interfere with folate's action, and it is not as nearly as common as iron deficiency. Good sources of folate would be asparagus, broccoli, leafy greens, beets, any type of citrus fruit, sunflower seeds, lentils, peas, and beans. Folate or vitamin B9, you might also have heard it referred to, deficiency anemia. A lack of folate in your body actually causes the body to produce abnormally large red blood cells, and these cannot function properly. The red blood cells carry oxygen around the body using the substance I talked to you about earlier, hemoglobin. Symptoms of this are very similar to that of iron deficiency anemia, but can also include tinnitus or ringing in the ears, cracked lips, difficulty concentrating, an irregular heartbeat, and chest pain. And you would want in this case to follow a strict gluten-free diet, of course, eat more folate-rich foods, and consider supplementation with your healthcare professionals, whether that be your general practitioner or a registered dietitian. Vitamin B12 is another nutrient of concern when it comes to celiac disease. It is essential for the synthesis of red blood cells, DNA, and RNA. It is involved in the maintenance of the nervous system and the formation of myelin, which is the insulation around your nerves. Food sources of this include meat, fish, seafood, poultry, eggs, and dairy products. And plant-based sources include any fortified cereals, non-dairy milks, nutritional yeast, or veggie-based meats. Symptoms are very similar here to folate deficiency, but can also include depression, peripheral neuropathy, muscle weakness, lack of coordination, balance problems and confusion. And this is very important because if prolonged, vitamin B12 deficiency can actually cause irreversible nerve damage. So this is a very important one in celiac disease especially. In order to combat this, you'd want to follow a strict gluten-free diet. You want to eat more foods that are rich in B12, and once again, consider supplementation with your healthcare professional. It's important to note for vitamin B12 that deficiency is usually not due to inadequate intake, but is due usually to impaired absorption.
All right, so the last nutrient we will cover today is fiber. Fiber is a type of carbohydrate that cannot be broken down in our body. There are two types of fiber. Soluble fiber slows the digestive system to allow for maximal absorption, and insoluble fiber helps to keep your digestive system moving and prevent constipation. Fiber is key to keeping your digestive system regular. This is important in those with celiac disease, as many may present with diarrhea or constipation at diagnosis. And unfortunately, constipation can be quite common on a gluten-free diet. To prevent these complications, assuming adequate amount of dietary fiber is important. Fiber is also helpful to control blood sugar levels, maintain a healthy weight, lower cholesterol, and decrease the risk of heart disease and stroke. So we know fiber is so important, but practically how can we add this to our diet? Here is a little poll. Vote which you think the highest fiber food on this list is. And you should see a poll popping up soon. Perfect. So we definitely have a few responses. The majority of you said black beans, which is correct. So I have them rated here in terms of highest to lowest fiber. So here you'll see that in a 100-gram serving of black beans, there's 15 grams of fiber compared to 7 grams for raspberries. The average gluten-free granola bar has about 3 grams per bar. And then the lowest containing one on this scale is gluten-free oats. For reference, the recommended daily intake of fiber is somewhere between 25 to 35 grams per day. So although the oats might contribute a small amount to that, adding them into foods will definitely help you reach your fiber goals throughout the day. When starting to add fiber to your diet, we recommend going slow and increasing water with intake. Some people find that when going from a low fiber diet to a high fiber diet, they can experience some discomfort. So we recommend going slow to avoid this. You can start adding fiber to your diet by adding oatmeal, flax, or chia to meatloaf, hamburger, or black bean patties. It's also good practice to eat whole fruits and vegetables instead of drinking their juices. Lots of fiber is found within the peelings and the seeds, which can get lost throughout the juicing process. You can also make a habit of choosing higher fiber pastas and gluten-free flour mixes, such as bean pasta, brown rice pasta, or lentil or quinoa pasta, or picking almond, amaranth, or lentil flour. This allows you to add fiber to your recipes without changing the basic structure of your meals. Lastly, try adding dried fruits and nuts to your baked goods, cereals, salads, and stir fries. You will find that adding fiber helps to keep you feel full longer and also helps to regulate your digestive system.
I just want to mention that when you exit this webinar, you may be prompted to fill out a survey just for us to get some feedback of what you thought of this webinar this evening. And if it does not show up in your browser, the link to the survey will actually be posted in the chat, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shelby. Thank you, Brooklyn, for that very informative webinar. Information was great. Thank you so much. So now's your time, everybody, to pop a question or two into the chat. We're happy to take any questions. We have dietitians at your disposal. So please ask some questions if you have any related to this webinar, or if you have any related to nutrition and celiac disease. I'm sure there's more people on this webinar that have the same question as you, so ask away. We'll give you a couple of minutes, and if not, then we'll sign off. But please ask away if you have anything on your mind. Otherwise, girls, that was really good. Well done. I always find in these things, I even pick up something new. Brooklyn, I will just clarify, when you were talking about vitamin D, I think you said that between May and October, we couldn't access vitamin D. It's between October and May, just to clarify for everybody. I know you know, but I think it just came out backwards.
Sorry, yes.
That's okay.
Trying to think about it the right way.
Just to clarify for the people out there, between October and May, the angle of the sun in North America isn't strong enough for us to actually have usable vitamin D. So that's why we often suggest supplementation throughout the winter months. And then in the summer, between May and October, when we can access vitamin D, we're quite often inside working or covered in a hat and sunscreen, in which case we also cannot, we cannot convert vitamin D2 to D3, which is the usable form. So again, sometimes we have to go to supplementation, or as the girls were talking about, fortification with our foods, or getting some higher vitamin D sources. So we have one question that just came in here. How do we increase nutrients and fiber in homemade baked goods? That's an excellent question. Thank you, Mary, for asking that one. Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I can jump on that one first, and then we can add as we go. So for fiber, you can add like oats, or if you find that the texture is a little bit funny, you can just throw your oats in a blender, blend them up, and you can make a fine oat flour if you have a certified gluten-free oat brand that you like. Or if you like using a different type of fiber, as I mentioned, some are a little bit higher, like chickpea and lentil would just have a little bit of a higher fiber content to start with. So you could throw those in. I know that the texture of them is a little bit different than some other flours, so you can always experiment and see if you can find the right texture that holds the recipe how you'd like it to be. For nutrients, you can always add, if you're making muffins or bars, adding some fresh fruit to those will help add some nutrients to that, or like bananas or carrots and zucchini. Those are fruits and veggies that really easily disguise. Not a nutrient, but a healthy fat. You can also put avocados into your baking and gives it a really nice creamy texture. There's a few suggestions. Nicole or Shelby, do you have anything to add?
I'll jump in. I know from myself, I love to add pumpkin seeds to everything. Pumpkin seeds are a very good source of iron. We were talking about iron earlier. They're a vegetarian source of iron, so also a source of protein. So both sort of discussed within our webinar today. I like to put them in muffins, or I like to put them in a granola bar recipe I like to make. They have a nice, if they're roasted, a nice nutty flavor and a nice crunch to them. So I like to add them to a lot of things. You could add dried fruits, dates, or apricots are another good source of fiber. Nuts and seeds are just always something that I rely on for a good nutrient punch. Walnuts are something you could add as well. Pecans, walnuts in particular are high in omega-3 fatty acids. So that's another good one to add to baking. Lots of good things out there that you can add to make otherwise a sweet treat somewhat healthy. So thanks, Mary, for that one. We do have another question here, and this is a great one. And if either of you, Brooklyn or Shelby, want to take it, do foods need to be certified gluten-free in order to be safe for celiac? If you guys don't want to take that one, I'm happy to.
I think I can speak on that, and you can add to it. I would say that when it comes to it being certified or not, I I would first go right to the ingredients, and you would want to see if anything in the ingredients would be anything glutinous, like a malt, you know, anything like that. And I think having it be, you know, certified gluten-free is just an extra kind of thing on top of that, saying like, we certified this, this was tested, it's below, you know, the trace amount it's allowed to have of gluten products in it. And it's just like an extra level of precaution. Is that kind of what you would say, Nicole?
Yeah, so Megan, actually, if I could get you to share our labeling document, perhaps in the chat or in the Q&A. Yeah, so as certified gluten-free labeling goes, in order to be certified gluten-free in Canada, it needs to be tested and below 20 parts per million of gluten. So that is always a guarantee that it's going to be gluten-free. For other labeling, what you can do is if you read the ingredients list, if there's no gluten-containing ingredients in the actual ingredients list, if there's no contains or gluten in the contains or may contain statement, that product would also be safe. Now, there's always exceptions to this rule, and that would be for mainly grains and oats. So if you're thinking about if you were buying a box of cereal, for example, that would have to be listed as gluten-free because it's a grain product. But for things like yogurt, if you're buying, you know, a sweet treat like a candy bar, or if you are buying, you know, a rice product like a packaged rice product, they would have to legally list that they had a gluten-containing ingredient in it on the ingredients list. Now, that also applies for any foods that are coming from an international destination into Canada. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency ensures that any food that comes into Canada has to be labeled according to Canadian laws. So regardless of its origin, when its destination is Canada, we will have to disclose any gluten-containing ingredient in that ingredients list, in the contains or may contain statement. So that ensures safety for the celiac community. I hope I answered that. If you had any more specific questions about that, it was an anonymous person that put that in. If you have any more specific questions, please let me know. And the next question is, should I also take the Gluten-Free 101 webinar also that was mentioned, or will it be a repeat of what was covered here? So I'll actually take that one. Our Gluten-Free webinar, our Gluten-Free 101 webinar is quite different from this one. So the Gluten-Free 101 is for our newly diagnosed celiacs or people who want a bit of a refresher. We go over exactly what I just talked about, our labeling laws. So it will really go into a deeper dive as to how do you choose the foods that are safe for you to eat. And take, you know, Linda Nielsen, who hosts our Gluten-Free 101s, I am there with her, but she actually does the speaking. She goes into a really great explanation on more of that. She goes into details of symptoms, symptom management, eating out, you know, some shared kitchen, how to live, you know, safely be in your own kitchen, how to, if you have somebody else who is not celiac, how do you share that space safely for yourself or your family member with celiac disease? So goes into actually a lot different detail than this conversation. So absolutely well worth coming to. So please sign up for that as well. We host a Gluten-Free 101 every month because we have new people being diagnosed every month. And so that's a really important one. So I always suggest for people to come to that. And somebody has asked, can you talk about psyllium in foods, particularly breads? Do either of you want to talk about psyllium fiber?
I can chat about that one. So we were just talking about that yesterday in the creation of this webinar. And for the most part, what we found is that psyllium fibers should be gluten-free. So those should be safe to add to your products. Of course, some people might be sensitive to them depending, because they do have a lot of fiber. So if you're not used to that, your gut might react a little bit to it. But in terms of gluten-free, they should be gluten-free. So they should be safe.
Good. Okay.
Cool. There are some questions in the chat box as well.
Super. Okay, let me just pop that up. Thank you for bringing that up. Let me just take a look if I can see that. Chat. Bear with me, everybody. I see them here. Thank you. Okay. What would be the recommended dose for vitamin D for celiac patients? Do you guys want me to take that one?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So for somebody with untreated or newly diagnosed celiac disease, their vitamin D levels might be lower. So there's a couple of different tactics you can take. quite often doctors just recommend supplementation with vitamin D. It's an expensive lab value to obtain, and the upper limit is hard to reach. So that being said, supplementation at a reasonable level is not going to do you any harm, even if your levels are normal. So if you go into something assuming that you could possibly be deficient, which to be honest, not only people with celiac disease, but the general population in Canada tends to run deficient in vitamin D. So if you stood kind of at that, depending on your age, between 1,000 and 2,000 international units a day, you will be just fine. For people with stable celiac disease, we would treat them just the same as we would the general population in Canada. So again, if you're an adult, 1,000 to about 2,000 a day is recommended, especially if you're over the age of 50. That is primarily for bone health, because remembering that without adequate vitamin D in our bodies, we're not going to be able to uptake the amount of calcium to ensure strong bones. So, doesn't matter how much calcium you put into your body, if you're deficient in vitamin D, you're not going to absorb that calcium. So your bones aren't going to reap the benefits of the calcium that you're eating. So ensuring vitamin D levels are within normal range is extremely important for bone health, especially in a northern climate. For younger ones, for the littles, like our little kiddos, we recommend, between 400 and 800 a day. For sort of more the middle range, 1,000 is fine. We don't recommend at any point over 4,000 a day. Then we, could possibly breach into higher levels. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, and the fat-soluble vitamins don't get excreted the way the water-soluble vitamins do. Fat-soluble vitamins being A, D, E, and K, and our water-solubles being our Bs and our Cs. So, standard, if you took about 1,000 a day, whether you're newly diagnosed or whether you're stable, is a good recommendation, unless you're a child, in which a lower level. So thank you for that question. Next question. How do you manage a gluten-free diet while at the same time observing a diabetic diet? Do either one of you guys want to tackle that?
I can kind of speak on that, yeah.
Okay.
So from my understanding, when you are, I'm not sure if you're newly diagnosed or not, but when you are newly diagnosed, just because your small intestine has been damaged, that you haven't been necessarily absorbing all the nutrients and all the stuff properly. So when you are first diagnosed, your blood sugar levels might be a little bit out of your control compared to how they've been managed in the past. And if you are type 1, you might need, insulin adjustments, and that's something you can discuss with obviously your family doctor. And then I know that because gluten-free foods do tend to have different amounts of carbs, fat, protein than some of the regular breads and pastas, that your body might react a little bit differently in regards to your blood sugar as well. So that's something you might need to keep in mind. And then, as we had mentioned earlier in the webinar, some gluten-free products aren't, they're not fortified, they're not enriched, so they might not have as much fiber and nutrients as you may need. So it would really be important to boost your fiber intake. That would help you, stay fuller longer, and that'll help keep your blood sugars more balanced. And then I would say that, if you are diabetic, it would be helpful to, have a gluten-free snack maybe in your car or in your purse or something like that. So when your blood sugar does drop, you are prepared and you don't have to eat something. You don't have to risk having something that has been contaminated or is not necessarily gluten-free and damaging your small intestine, when you could just have something gluten-free with you and be more prepared for it.
Somebody's dinner's ready. I could hear. That was great. Thank you, Shelby. Appreciate that. That was that was great. Okay, what else do we have here? So I see, if everybody can see in the chat, those posts have been put up about our labeling guide. Ask the CCA at Celiac CA is our website, and then our phone numbers are here as well. I do see one last question from Ellen. If a gluten-free mix has cornstarch in it, is it safe to accept that the cornstarch used is gluten-free? So I'm going to take this question, guys. So that's a great question. So if the product is labeled gluten-free, then you can trust that it is gluten-free. In Canada, it wouldn't have been able to have a gluten-free label on it without being tested. So if it does say gluten-free on it, then yes. Cornstarch is something that independently, if you're buying it on its own, we do recommend that it have a gluten-free label on it. So please do that. But if it is within a product and it is labeled gluten-free, it will have to have passed those standard tests, and it will be gluten-free and safe. Okay, I think that comes to the end of our questions. I hope I didn't miss any in there. I'm just going to quickly look through here, but I think we got them all. So one more in the Q&A here. No. Okay, good. We will wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you to Brooklyn and thank you to Shelby for the informative webinar. That was wonderful. I enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else did as well. Megan, did you want to say any closing remarks?
No, just thank you everyone for joining us tonight. As Shelby and Brooklyn mentioned, there is the link to the survey there in the chat. If you could take a minute to fill that out afterwards and let us know your thoughts, that would be very much appreciated.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.